Big banks, 3D printers, mattress companies. This show's got everything. Strap in. Investor Beat starts now. Thanks for watching. I'm Chris Hill. For the second day in a row, all lights were green on Wall Street. The Dow, NASDAQ, and S&P 500 all rising as earnings season slowly gets into high gear. Joining me in studio today, Matt Koppenheffer and Bryan White. Guys, our top story, shares of Bank America hitting a two-year high after fourth quarter profits came in just shy of $3.5 billion. CEO Bryan Moynihan continues to rebuild BofA after the disastrous Countrywide acquisition back in 2008. And Matt, it seems like with BofA, just like we saw with Wells Fargo, JP Morgan, part of the story here is the improving credit quality.
I really like that you said he's rebuilding it after the Countrywide acquisition as opposed to the financial crisis, because that's really what it comes down to. I
like to think of that as their own personal financial crisis.
Exactly, it sure was. So we're like 6 years away from the financial crisis now, and we're still seeing improvements from that era. And one of the ways that we're seeing it, like you said, with the credit improvements on the balance sheet, and that's flowing through the income statement as well, because the banks aren't having to provision as much against bad loans as they once did. And as an added bonus, they're actually releasing some of the reserves that they set aside way back when they thought maybe, who knows, the world is going to end, something like that.
Do you like this space when you step back and look at the entire financial spectrum? Do you like the big banks, or are there other ways you like to play this?
I like to follow them. I'm not a big investor, so if I'm going to draw my circle of competence, the big banks are certainly out of there. And I'll point to one of the quotes from the conference call that Bryan Moynihan put out there, and he says that they're slowly starting to they're on their journey to simplifying our company, is essentially what he said. To me, it's not simple enough. When I look at those balance sheets, I'm not comfortable enough. So within the financial space, I'm going to follow them. And one of the reasons why, an interesting thing that all three big banks put out this week with their earnings releases is, mortgage originations. They're down, nearly 50% for all of them. And so the question for me is, when does the housing market get back to normal? Like he said, we're about 6 years, post-crisis, and we're still not to normal. The rising interest rates is the thing right now, so we're still a little ways away from sort of a normal environment in the housing market.
We talked Wells Fargo, JP Morgan. Is Bank of America your favorite in terms of the stock right now, keeping in mind it's at a two-year high?
Actually, in terms of overall long-term feeling good about owning a bank and feeling safe about owning a bank stock, Wells Fargo may be it. But I personally like Citigroup. I think they've got some good new management in there. A banker, a longtime Citigroup banker with Michael Corbat. You can't argue with the valuation too. Citigroup's stock is trading a little bit below tangible book value. I think there's a lot of good upside there, and I think it's a good story.
All right, let's get to some of the day's movers and shakers. Tesla Motors continuing to rise after Tuesday's announcement that deliveries in the fourth quarter came in 20% higher than expected, on a nice little run this week for Tesla.
Yeah, I mean, so at the Detroit Auto Show, they announced that they're going to deliver around 6,900 Model S's this quarter, and that's huge. I mean, I think that beats the most optimistic scenarios heading into the quarter. Earlier this month, Elon Musk mentioned that production had gotten to about 600 a week. That was great news, but nobody expected that run rate to almost, fit into this quarter. They expected that, going forward into the future. So the other thing that was brought up is now the average selling prices. So when they report, it's going to be interesting. Do we not only get a bump in production, but do we also see that bump follow through in the average selling prices, which is huge for Tesla, given the pricing power that they've already exerted.
Mattress Firm Holding Corp up big after third quarter profits rose 46%. You look at this stock, kind of a roller coaster, because a quarter ago the stock was tanking after bad results.
The stock's looking pretty springy today, Chris. I know you're looking forward to that. I think part of the rise today is due to a rumor that the New York Post is reporting on, that Mattress Firm may be looking to buy out privately held Sleepy's. And as New York Post said, this would create the only specialty mattress retailer in the U.S. with coast-to-coast footprint. They're saying that it might be an all-stock deal, which is kind of interesting looking at 26 times trailing EPS valuation for Mattress Firm. Looks like a good time to use stock as a way to do an acquisition like this. who knows what happens, whether this acquisition goes through, but obviously investors are excited about having that kind of coast-to-coast U.S. presence.
If it's in the New York Post, it's got to be true.
It's got to be true.
Control4 Corporation up big for the second day in a row in the wake of Google's acquisition of Nest. Control4 offers a range of automated products for the home, including thermostats and security. This stock's up about 60% in 2 days. Is that just a tad optimistic?
Well, I think, so there's two different points that I would make. Number one, not many shares trade. It's a very thinly traded stock, and almost about half of the shares outstanding are held within venture capital firms. So the float is about 50% of the shares outstanding. It's thinly traded. The pop doesn't surprise me. And then the other thing is, if you compare both companies, you compare Nest and you compare Control4, and you just look at their revenue, because Nest, all we have is an approximate revenue figure for this year. Nest is about twice the size. And right now, Control4, after the pop, is about a $680 million company. The bid for Nest is over $3 billion. So it sort of, I guess, makes sense.
Sounds like it's still got room to run then.
Yes.
All right, finally, 3D printing company ExOne down after lowering its 2013 revenue outlook by more than 15%. Matty Argersinger, our colleague, was at the Consumer Electronics Show last week, and one of his big takeaways was there are all of these 3D printing companies out there. A lot of them are not going to survive. Do you think ExOne is one of those that will survive?
Oh, that's above my head as to whether this particular, because a lot of it is about the particular technology and what kind of materials they're using and that sort of thing. And it is so new, and it is such a nascent industry that I think we look 20 years down the road and we can say this is going to be really exciting. But like Maddie's saying, who wins? In this case, they're going to be expecting to do at the midpoint about $41 million in 2013 sales. That's against $48 million that they previously expected. And you're looking at this being an $800 million company, so obviously expectations are high. On the bright side, management still thinks that 2014 can deliver 40 to 50% growth for shareholders.
All right, that's going to do it for today's action. Give me a stock I can put on my watch list.
Netflix, they report next week. Should be interesting comments after the U.S. Court of Appeals struck down the FCC's net neutrality rules. It should be a very interesting conference call for Netflix.
All right, what about you, Matt?
Citigroup reports tomorrow. I talked about them a little bit earlier. The big four banks tend to get lumped together, but the stories are actually fairly different between the four of them. With Citigroup, you've got this big global footprint, so it'll be interesting to see how that differs from what we saw at JP Morgan, Bank of America, and Wells Fargo. In addition, Citigroup has been continuing to work down Citi Holdings, which is basically where they took all of their bad stuff and said, we're going to chuck this over here and hope that it goes away. So investors will be looking for how that has been working out.
And CEO Michael Corbat, you had a good run in 2013. We'll see if that continues this year. All right, for Matt Koppenheffer and Bryan White, I'm Chris Hill. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.